"Don't let Zelensky get the last laugh." His face is everywhere, and I mean absolutely everywhere.
Ha ne adj Isten, nem Orbán Viktor lesz a vezetőnk, akkor nem lesz nyugalmunk. Az biztos, hogy elviszik a fiatalokat Ukrajnába.
Sákból elmarad, hogy míg a nép küzd, fárad, intat,
16 years
pihenjen ő árnyéka.
the current political system. I think these people want to belong to Russia.
Rohadt szemét az Zelenszky egyébként is. Megfenyegette az Orbán Viktor. Azzal, hogy megölik gyermekeit, meg a családját kiírtja. Tehát ilyen ez az Zelenszky, ilyen popátlan szemétláda. Ez a sátának a főembere.
We are here in Budapest, the capital of Hungary, just 4 weeks before the parliamentary elections that many see as the most consequential in the country's modern history. But its outcomes will likely have impact beyond the country's borders, including on the EU, Ukraine and Russia.
After 16 years in power, Hungarian Prime Minister and leader of the Fidesz party, Viktor Orban, is for the first time facing an election that he might lose. High inflation, falling living standards, frozen EU funds and a string of corruption scandals have fueled the rising popularity of his main challenger, Peter Magyar, leader of the Tisza party. Although Magyar has been leading in the polls, the gap between their two parties has decreased recently. As the election is still weeks away, Orban has a chance of getting ahead, and his main bet is Ukraine.
Even though President Zelensky is obviously not on the ballot in the Hungarian elections, that's the impression you get when you walk around the streets of Budapest. His face is everywhere, and I mean absolutely everywhere. They are the risk, says this billboard with President Zelensky, opposition leader Peter Magyar, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The one next to it says, "Don't let Zelensky get the last laugh." So the theme is quite clear, depicting Ukraine and Zelensky as a danger to Hungary's interest. So today we're going to two rallies, one held by supporters of Orban's party and the other held by supporters of Peter Magyar's party, Tisza. We'll be talking to Hungarian people to understand where do they think Hungary is heading after the elections and how they feel about Ukraine.
Like Ukraine, Hungary has its experience of occupation by Moscow. In 1956, Soviet forces invaded Hungary to crush a nationwide revolution against the communist regime. Only in 1989 did Hungary regain its full independence, peacefully transitioning to democracy and eventually joining NATO and the EU. But another turn came after 2010 with the election victory of Viktor Orban's Fidesz party. Once an anti-communist activist, Orban set out to build what he called an illiberal state, steering Hungary toward democratic backsliding while deepening ties with Moscow. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Orban has consistently blocked European sanctions against Moscow, assistance to Kyiv, and Ukraine's efforts to join the EU. While the rest of the Union sought to wean itself off Russian energy, Orban went the opposite direction, increasingly turning to Russian oil and gas, claiming that only this can ensure low energy costs for Hungarians. At home, Orban portrayed himself as the only leader standing between Hungary and war, casting Kiev, Brussels, and domestic opposition as warmongers.
Since 2014, practically all election campaigns of the incumbent Fidesz party were built around the central concept of external enemy. And because Prime Minister Orban and his Fidesz party is currently under very significant pressure, as the party is underperforming in the polls, they are reverting back to the last strategy that worked. And that's fear-mongering from Hungary's potential involvement into the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. And they unfortunately extended it with an anti-Ukrainian campaign. Being hostile to Ukraine has been obviously an organic part of Hungarian foreign policy and also state propaganda over the past 3 to 4 years. What's qualitatively different that over the past couple of months, Ukraine was framed in the Hungarian public discourse by the government as a direct source of threat to Hungarian sovereignty, to Hungarian energy security.
Tensions between Hungary and Ukraine surged sharply in recent months. Orban has accused Kyiv of deception and blackmail over the suspension of Russian oil transit via the Druzhba pipeline. After the Hungarian leader threatened to use political force to break the so-called oil blockade, President Zelensky implied he'd give Orban's address to Ukrainian soldiers, a comment seen by many as a personal threat. This inflamed the discourse even further. Soon after, Hungarian authorities seized Ukrainian bank vehicles carrying cash and gold, detaining and expelling 7 bank employees over alleged money laundering suspicions, an incident Kyiv denounced as state terrorism.
On the one hand, I have full understanding for the frustration on the Ukrainian side after Hungary actively blocking Ukrainian efforts in their war of self-defense against the Russian aggression over the past 4 years. And I think that's the baseline. Notwithstanding this, I think the statements of President Zelensky last Wednesday were not helpful. They were not helpful in the bilateral Ukrainian-Hungarian context because it might have made it even more complicated to come to more friendly terms, even after a potential change of government. But they were certainly not helpful from the perspective of the Hungarian campaign logic. And those statements clearly helped Prime Minister Orban and his Fidesz party. I understand that this was certainly not the intention of President Zelensky, but this is unfortunately how these statements are on the one hand exploited, obviously, by the Hungarian governing party, and how those statements will play out in the context of the Hungarian elections.
So we're standing at the Margaret's Bridge, where the Peace March, the pro-government rally, is already gathering. You can see it's really packed, all filled with Hungarian flags. And we already see some anti-Ukrainian posters. One of them says, "We won't give our life for Zelensky." We even got into a somewhat tense situation when we were filming a billboard with President Zelensky.
Rohadt szemét az Zelenszky egyébként is megfenyeget az Orbán Viktor. Azzal, hogy megöli gyermekeit, megöli, a családját kiírtja. Tehát ilyen ez az Zelenszky, ilyen popátlan szemétláda. Bele akar avatkozni a választásokban. Hát de nem fog neki, nem menni. Ezt az embert el kell takarítani úgy, ahogy van. Ez a sátának a főembere.
So the Peace March is heading out to the Parliament building, to the Kossuth Square. So we'll go now along with the crowd. What do you think about this recent disputes with Ukraine? What do you think should be the relationship between Hungary and Ukraine?
I understand Ukraine that they are in war, so they have no idea what are they saying. Yeah? In this case, I'm also supporting whatever Orban is doing. We are part of the European Union, so Brussels should be next to us and not next. Should stand behind us, yeah? And not with Zelensky.
Ha ne adj Isten, nem Orbán Viktor lesz a vezetőnk, akkor nem lesz nyugalmunk. Belépünk a háborúba, ez történhet. Az biztos, hogy elviszik a fiatalokat Ukrajnába, hát engem most már nem, hát szégyelje magát az ukrán elnök. Hát Orbán Viktort fenyegette meg, elmondta, hogy átadják a katonáinak a címét, és majd akkor elbeszélgetnek az ő nyelvén. Ez aztán tényleg ez már nem is tudom, a legalja. Ennél mélyebbre már nem lehet süllyedni. Mondom, a Hitler se csinált ilyet.
So why did you come here today to this rally?
I just wanted to hear the speech of Viktor Orban. I prefer him better than the opposition. It's really hard because we are dependent from Ukraine, of course, because of the friendship oil pipe, and it makes it really hard to work on the the relations between the two countries. Of course, we have to be friendly with the Russians because we don't really have any choice.
Amellett tüntetünk, hogy béke legyen, ne háború, mert ha Magyar Péter kerül hatalomra, logikus, hogy aláveti magát a brüsszeli irányításnak. Ennek az lesz a következménye, hogy belesodorunk a háborúba. Ezt nem hiszem, hogy az oroszok beleavatkoznának. Hogy szurkolnak, az biztos. Én nem tartom valószínűleg. Ukrajnát talán inkább.
Prime Minister Orban is speaking right now, and from the speakers that were before him we heard the word Ukraine many times, and the answer was booing among the crowd. We could also see many posters depicting opposition leader Peter Magyar as a puppet of Zelensky.
With rising living costs for ordinary Hungarians standing in stark contrast to what many see as rampant corruption and cronyism within the Fidesz government, Orban's popularity started to dip in recent years, paving the way for his challenger Peter Magyar. Magyar was once a little-known Fidesz lawyer married to, until 2023, Judit Varga, a former justice minister and Orban's ally. He rose to fame in February 2024 after leaving the party and shedding light on what he called corrupt and authoritarian dealings within Fidesz. Rejecting left or right labels, Magyar started his meteoric rise in politics as the new leader of the once marginal Tisza party.
So we are now at the Tisza rally, the rally of the opposition party. Immediately we can notice some differences. First of all, there are actually EU flags in the crowd, and secondly, the age average seems to be somewhat lower in this crowd. So now we're gonna go speak to some supporters of the opposition who ask why did they come out in support of Peter Magyar and how they feel about Ukraine.
We are really in a crossroads for Hungary, whether we actually will belong to Europe or we will go back in time where we would belong to the not so friendly East. We belong to Europe.
So it's important for you to fix relationship with the European Union? Or
Absolutely, absolutely. And today is really the biggest Hungarian national holiday, and this is very important to us. First and foremost, to come together as Hungarian first. We would need to be friendly with each other. We are not enemies of each other.
Viktor Orban says a lot that Tisza is collaborating with Ukraine. What do you think about this?
Well, I think they tried to manipulate the regular Hungarian people because they just want to stay in the position and steal more money.
There were some controversies or reports that Russia is interfering with the elections here. Are you worried about that?
Yeah, I worry about that because I really think that 4 years ago they also cheated. Probably they will try again. And with help from outside, USA or Russia, doesn't matter, the cheating is cheating.
Chance to 16 years the current political system. It's very important to the values of the European Union.
Addig folyvást küszködni
I
kell.
think these people want to belong to Russia.
So the central theme of Orban's anti-Tisza campaign is trying to paint Magyar as a pro-Ukrainian politician or a puppet of Kyiv. But Magyar is far from that. And actually, when we talk to Tisza supporters, few of them put Ukraine in the center of their worries. They want better relationships with their neighbors, sure, but their main priority is improvement of lives of people here in Hungary. How important for you are things like a relationship with the European Union or with Ukraine, for example?
I think that it's also important, but I don't know if we could change that relationship.
You said you don't know if you can change a relationship with Ukraine or European Union.
With Ukraine.
Do you want the relationship between Hungary and Ukraine to change somehow?
Actually, I don't care about that. I only care about our home, our country, and this is why I want to change.
It's important to repair those relationships, what you were talking about, with our neighbors, and Ukraine is our neighbor.
What do you think about this recent tensions between Ukraine and Hungary?
I don't think we have any problem with the Ukrainian.
Köszönjük szépen!
And I feel ashamed when this government is trying to mix up and change the narrative. They think it's completely wrong. It's not good for the minority, the Hungarian minority in Ukraine. What we are doing right now, it's a shame. They had 16 years to build up something good the European funds, but they wasted this money. They stole this money. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. This is made up.
Of course, I want to live in peace with all the neighbor countries because I like to travel, I like the people, and I don't want to hate me because of Orban and because of this government.
Akinek jár a tisztes nyugdíj. Polgár az, aki szabadon gondolkodhat, szabadon indíthat vállalkozást, szabadon választhat.
With the result of the election still uncertain, Orban is expected to continue putting Ukraine at the center of his campaign, trying to stoke fears of war and accusing the opposition of colluding with Ukraine. And Peter Magyar has little room to maneuver here, as he can't afford to give Orban's narrative additional ammunition. Adding to the uncertainty are reports of Russian intelligence officers operating here in Budapest, suggesting that Moscow may be attempting to influence the vote in Orban's favor.
There were some very unfortunate developments. So there is actually evidence that in January a group of GRU, so Russian military intelligence experts, arrived to Hungary under diplomatic cover. And there is a widespread and I think well-founded fear that the mission of that group is actually to put a foreign interference campaign or project on stable foods, like what it happened previously in Moldova and Romania. However, unfortunately, the structural difference actually to those countries is that in those with that election interference campaigns, they needed to act against the government to put a Russia-friendly candidate in potential power position. In Hungary, they are helping the incumbent, meaning that the impact and even the extent of their operations and activities can go beyond that what the world experienced in Romania and Moldova. And as you might have also realized, we are already there practically more than 4 weeks before the election, that both parties are already accusing each other and each other's partners with foreign interference and election manipulation. And we can only expect that this narrative will be becoming even tougher.
What are your expectations if Orban wins another term?
If history is a teacher in anything, then we have seen that every single electoral victory emboldened Prime Minister Orban to become more radical. So even if he wins with a more or less still acceptable electoral mandate, then he might feel emboldened to exploit actually the time pressure on Ukraine and continue exerting or continue blackmailing actually Kyiv with the blockade of the 90 billion financial package, for example, to completely restore oil transit through the country. If he wins with rigged elections, then obviously he will become even more isolated in the European Union and even more dependent and reliant on foreign authoritarian support, may that come from Russia, China, or potentially from the new American administration.
We will be covering Hungary's election campaign in the weeks to come, including on the election day. If you want to support our work, please join our community of members at kyivindependent.com/membership. Thank you.